Jane called Terry at his TV repair shop. "Terry, this is Deputy Jane Smith. Can you tell us what that item Alan took to your shop does?" Terry replied, "Well, I've taken it apart and have traced the circuitry, and it seems to be a transmitter. It transmits a signal that will reach several miles, just sort of a series of pings. Probably something like a transponder so that someone could find it easily." Jane said, "We have 2 more of those things. Could you tell us more about them if we brought them over?" He replied, "I can only try. Bring them over." Alan and Jane talked. Jane told Alan what Terry had told her, and he said that it could be tracked. "So let's take the others over there and let Terry examine them too." Charlie 3 had been assigned to patrol the county roads around Whitemore. They saw a pickup parked alongside the road with no one close by as they drove. They noted what they could make, model, color, license state, and number and reported it to the dispatcher. Sheriff Murdoch ordered Charlie 3 to scout out the area, and he would check with the other state's Department of Motor Vehicles to obtain all available information concerning that truck. Charlie 3 got out of their patrol car and checked out the area. In the pickup bed, they found what looked like a radio receiver with what looked like a diamond-shaped antenna. Their search of the area revealed footprints leading away from the truck into the bar ditch and broken down weeds leading west. Officer Joyner drove the patrol car as her partner, Corporal Donaldson, followed down the ditch. The footprint stopped abruptly, and he could follow no further. Everett Donaldson got in the car, and they returned to where the pickup had been. However, it was gone. Charlie 3 reported the facts to the dispatcher and continued their patrol. Charlie 3 found another murder victim, another hobo, with his bindle and backpack about a mile east. Olivia Joyner radioed the dispatcher, "Dispatch, Charlie 3, 1043, investigating murder, send MV01, Charlie 1, and coroner." The dispatcher replied, 10-4. Charlie 1 arrived with MV01 and the coroner to begin their investigation. Sheriff Murdoch asked Olivia and Everett to tell him everything they had found. They gave him a detailed report, the pickup description and license plate information, their tracking, and their subsequent discovery of the victim. Alan and Jane took pictures, searched the area, and examined the backpack and the bindle. Again, they found the Army dog tags in the bindle, Moore, Trace B. RA176431778, Oneg, Episcopal. The sheriff asked Olivia to photograph the victim's face to show Willie for possible identification. When shown the photo, Willie confirmed that the victim was Trace Moore, Staff Sergeant Trace Moore. Again, the victim's throat had been cut, as before, from behind, left-handed, efficiently, allowing the victim to bleed out in seconds. Now, there were 4 victims, all murdered in the same way, all former members of the same company and the same platoon that had served in Vietnam at the same time. Willie had been the platoon leader, and he had said that the men of his platoon had planned a reunion there in Mountain View County, about 20 men. The burning question now was, how many more victims would be murdered before the killing was stopped? Who was the murderer, and why was he targeting this group of Vietnam veterans? Although Sheriff Murdoch was extremely angry at the thought that someone was on a killing spree in his county, John whispered between clenched teeth, "When I catch this guy, he'll be lucky to stand trial." One day, Jane and Alan were in the CSI lab looking at what had been collected when Jane picked up the photograph from Joe Wiley's bindle. She asked, "Alan, did you ever make an inquiry about this family in Walnut Creek?" Alan replied that since Willie identified the victim, it seemed unnecessary. Alan picked up Bill Carter's watch. "Maybe we should make some inquiries. Let's check the other backpacks and bindles, maybe we missed something." Jane started going through one backpack and found a single piece of paper. It turned out to be a restraining order served against Jordan Curtis by his wife, Helen Curtis, from Gloversville, New York. Alan had started examining the 4th victim's belongings and found a magazine article from Selma, Texas, concerning a nasty divorce for Trace Moore and his wife, Barbara. "My goodness," said Jane, "it looks like these 4 guys lost their families." Alan said, "We need to ask Willie about this." So Alan and Jane went to the sheriff's office and told him their findings. "Sheriff, we need to ask Willie about this." Sheriff Murdoch replied, "I'll talk to Willie. I'll let you know what he says tomorrow." Meanwhile, Alan decided to contact the assumed ex-wives of their 4 victims. He started by contacting the Castroville Police Department about finding Regina Carter, the wife or ex-wife of William Carter. The Castroville police replied 2 days later with the present name of Bill Carter's ex-wife, Regina Sorensen, her address, and home phone number. That afternoon, Alan called the number provided and left a message on the answering machine. "Mrs. Sorensen, this is Captain Smith of the Mountain View County Sheriff's Department. I have something to discuss with you concerning William Carter, your ex-husband. At your convenience, please call me at 808-555-2134, That's 808-555-2134. Alan made similar calls to the ex-wives of the other 3 victims, Joe Wiley, Jordan Curtis, and Trace Moore. After 2 days, the phone in the CSI lab rang, and Alan answered. CSI lab, Captain Smith speaking. Caller, Captain Smith, this is Regina Sorensen. Do you have news about my former husband, William Carter? What is it? Alan, William Carter is dead. He was found 5 days ago, murdered by person or persons unknown. The caller broke down and started bawling, and she hung up. Then the phone rang again, and again Alan answered. CSI lab, Captain Smith speaking. Caller, Captain Smith, this is Babs Wiley. Joe Wiley was my dad. My mom is at work. Can you tell me about my dad? Alan, how old are you? Caller, I'm 16. Why? Alan, your father is dead. He was found 3 days ago, murdered. Caller, clearly shaken. Why, what, when, who? There were sobs, then the line went dead. When Jordan Curtis' wife called after Alan told her that Jordan was dead, her voice grew cold. Thanks, Captain. And she hung up. Likewise, Trace Moore's mom politely thanked Alan, and she hung up with a sob. Then Alan got a call from the sheriff. Alan, mind coming here? I need to talk to you and Jane. Alan replied, we'll be right there. Alan called to Jane, sheriff wants to see us. And they walked over to the courthouse and went to the sheriff's office. Sheriff Murdoch asked them to sit and then began to tell them what he found out from Willie. What we have is a very elaborate suicide scheme. 2 men met up, Bill Carter and Joe Wiley. Bill had the pickup, radio equipment, and an extremely sharp knife, which he gave to Joe. Then Joe cut Bill's throat, took the truck, radio equipment, and knife, and went and found Jordan Curtis. Jordan cut Joe's throat and took the truck, radio equipment, and knife and found Trace Moore. Trace cut Jordan's throat, took the truck, radio equipment, and knife, and began searching for one of the other veterans to have that veteran cut his throat, take the equipment, and begin searching for another victim. Alan cringed and said, is Willie part of this scheme? The sheriff replied, they asked him if he wanted to be part of the scheme, but he declined. Finally, however, he told them he would not inform me unless I asked him directly. Jane asked, why such an elaborate scheme? The sheriff answered, they all have old insurance policies, 100,000 or more, that would go to their families. 20 different victims and 20 different murderers all using the same MO, and we might not be able to prove suicide, thus ensuring that the insurance money does get to their loved ones. Alan asked, why? The sheriff answered, these men have lost everything. Alan, you know what they have gone through, and you thought about ending everything. The difference was that Jane walked into your life. Understand? Alan dropped his head. Yeah, I know. But we can't allow this to continue, can we? The sheriff replied, no, but the plan is clever, and we just might not be able to stop it. We will work hard to stop it, increase country patrols, including night patrols, alert farmers and ranchers to watch out for hobos, and report anything out of the ordinary. Alan thought, then asked, what if we pick up one of these veterans we believe to be part of this scheme? What do we do? If he is just walking around, he has not committed a crime. The only thing we could bring up against him is a suspicion of his part in the scheme. What do we do? We can't prove a darn thing. The sheriff replied, exactly, so the quietus is on us. To do a better job of finding them before the designated killer does. We'll never catch them, we need to be proactive. Alan remarked, so, we need everybody thinking about this. I'll tell you, Sheriff, I would almost be inclined to let it go to completion. I know how they feel. The system betrayed them. Sheriff Murdoch said, I know you feel for them, but you're a good enough cop not to let your feelings cloud your judgment. Jane asked, should we call in the FBI? Alan and the sheriff almost shouted, no. The sheriff went on, I would just as soon call in the state police, and that's not going to happen anytime soon. This is our case, our problem, and our county, Jane said, why don't we get a radio and track down the pings ourselves? Then, we could corral them all and call in some counselors to help them. Alan added, why not bring in the VA? The sheriff nodded, I'll talk to Willie and maybe call the VA. President Clinton has told the VA to be more helpful. Jane said she would get hold of Terry and have him help her get the equipment she needed to track those pings. Terry helped Jane and Alan set up a radio direction finder and taught them how to operate their system to track the pings. Alan decided to use his pickup. He and Jane began to track several pings, which was relatively easy work. They found their very first ping within an hour of beginning their search. Unfortunately, the target had already been murdered. Alan and Jane called the sheriff, told him where the victim was, and told him that they would be continuing their search. After another 2 hours, they came upon the mysterious pickup driving along County Road 11, not far from where Alan and Amber had found Deborah Jean Lacey. Then came the race. Unfortunately for the other driver, Alan was far more experienced driving on the gravel roads, and the other truck driver slid into the bar ditch. Jane jumped out of the pickup and used her Vulcan nerve pinch or Jane's gentle loving touch, whichever you prefer, to subdue her opponent. She cuffed the man and goose-stepped him over to Alan's truck. The man refused to get in Alan's pickup, so Alan picked the man up and deposited him in the truck's bed. Then, Jane shackled the man to a tie-down bracket in the truck's bed. Alan took out his tow strap and pulled the suspect truck out of the ditch, Jane driving Alan's pickup as they towed the other truck out. Jane called the sheriff and relayed what they had done: the victim, truck, radio equipment, and the knife with the blood still on it. The sheriff told them to stay where they were. He would bring help to take their prisoner to jail, impound the pickup and release them to continue their search for the rest of the veterans. The sheriff had contacted the Veterans Administration. However, they categorically refused to assist this platoon of Vietnam veterans. The sheriff then called the state's senators and representatives and asked for their intervention with the VA. What they found out later is that the senators and representatives talked to the president and asked for his intervention. The next phone call Sheriff Murdoch received was from an institution Veterans Administration administrator asking how the VA could help the sheriff's department. Within 2 days, the officials of the VA were in Mountain View County helping to track down the remaining veterans, with the intent to have them committed to the VA hospital psychiatric facility. According to Willie, 35 members of his platoon survived Vietnam. Willie said that 13 had already taken their own life. 1 was a successful cartoonist. 6 were murdered in Mountain View County, which meant that 14 were to be incarcerated at Fort Sheridan in Wyoming. The murderer caught would be in an institution for the criminally insane. As for the deaths of the 6, their loved ones all received unencumbered death certificates to allow them to collect the insurance as the victims had wished. The sheriff called Alan and Jane to his office. Sheriff Murdoch stood and called all the office staff and other officers into his office as well. Then he spoke. "Officer Jane Smith, you have proven to be an amazing addition to our little department. Your ideas during this investigation were invaluable. Therefore, Officer Smith, you are hereby promoted to the rank of corporal." Jane looked at Alan, wide-eyed. She smiled and then began to cry, blubbering out, "Thank you, thank you." Sheriff Murdoch handed her her chevrons and told everyone to get back to work. Then, smiling, he patted her on the shoulder, and she turned and hugged Alan. She said, "Let's take 7 at the truck stop."